Good morning everyone. In this video I'm going to look at painting this reference photo of a beautiful tree, lots of snowy branches, lots of complexity in there. And the aim of the video is really to try and negatively paint around the branches so that we create an illusion of snow. So we use the white of the page to give us the illusion that there is white paint on our paper. Obviously watercolor is a transparent medium, so that's why I like to use the white of the page as the opaque white color within the painting. So this reference photograph is from, I think, an Instagram account called Draw Daily Together, and as you can see, I already made a rough sketch which essentially just serves single purpose. It reminds me where I should paint and where I shouldn't paint. I try not to create it too detailed because the risk is always that it becomes almost like a paint by number if I sketch things out too detailed on the paper. But the first thing I did was I put in a horizon line, I put in the shape of the pond, and then I drew in a couple of main branches of the tree so that I can have a sense of how the tree should be positioned. For this painting, I'm going to try and use my 3 brushes. So the first one being my number 12 round brush. This is my kind of general workhorse brush. It's very thirsty, it's natural hair, and when it's wet it creates a lovely point. I then am going to use my 1 1/4 inch flat brush, and this is a synthetic brush, and I thought I'd use it for things like branches. So just to give a branch a more square shape, I thought I'd use this brush here. And then finally I'm going to use my number 4 rigger brush for any kind of detail work. And again, this is quite a frequently used brush in my arsenal. For my paints, I don't wash out my palette, so when I'm ready to go, I'm just going to use some. I'll wet the palette and I'll create a sort of a gray mixture or a neutral color mixture here. But I organize my paints from cool blues, or from warm blues, cool blues, greens, and then my reds, my warm reds, my cool reds, and then my yellows, warm and cool yellows, and then I've got a little bit of ivory black in there for detail. So for this painting, because we're looking at a winter scene, I'm going to try and stick to 2 colors. I will stick to my cerulean blue, and I will stick to my burnt sienna, and then let's see what happens. I think obviously I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to have this neutral color which I use from the rest of from the old paints in my palette, but these are the only 2 colors that I will try and use today, just to set myself a bit of a challenge, but also keep it gloomy and wintry. So first thing first, I'm going to activate my paints. And now I'm going to create this neutral color just by mixing everything on the page. Now when I see the color already materializing, I get a sense of whether it's warm or too cool. If it's too warm, I add a little bit of cool blue into it, as I'm doing here now. If it's too cool, I'll add a little bit of sienna into it to warm it up. But this will create a nice cool neutral. And then with the same brush, I am going to start thinking about painting that sky now. So we have some snowy branches, which means I'm going to need to negatively paint around them. So with a wet brush, I'm just painting where the sky will be. So I'm going to paint the negative shape of the sky and then hope that through that the branches and their snowiness will emerge quite naturally. You can see, so I'm kind of thinking about where I want my hard edges to be and where I'd like my soft edges to be. So as a general rule of thumb, I like to keep everything in the distance soft and everything closer to me harder. But let's see how this painting goes. Now, what we're also seeing is that we've got a kind of a gradient from darker blue to a lighter, cooler color towards the horizon. So I think what I'll do is I will turn my page over, and this way I can paint from, I can keep a nice sharp horizon line, but also the paint is going to move down the page, and that will give me the gradient that I'm looking for. Every once in a while I have to flip the image in my mind to still make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And then this area here, it's I thought I'd make it a little bit more neutral rather than blue. I'll make it a little gloomier. So I'll mix up my cerulean blue with some burnt sienna to get a more neutral tone. Now any excess water down here, what I like to do is I just like to dry off my brush and my towel, and then I can use the brush itself to soak up the excess water just by carefully dragging it along the bottom like this. And that soaks it up nicely, and then I can make any kind of corrections. Great. Now I think we can turn this over and see how it's looking. Yeah, that looks okay. Maybe a little less extra water here. So I seem to have gotten the gradient that I wanted. So it's lighter down here, and then it gets a little darker towards the top. I wanted to have a little bit more contrast here, which actually I just might have. So I'm going to cheat and use my ivory black for this contrast. And I don't know how it will work. Hopefully it will work okay. And if not, well, that's fine. I just want to create a sort of a striking gradient here, so maybe some gloomier looking skies on this side of the page, just to create a little bit of interest. I'm just loading pure pigment onto the page to create some areas of interest. And I'm letting it run down for the same reason as I let the blue run down here. Now I'm just going to take all the water out of my brush with my fingers, which means I can do a little bit of blending without worrying that I'm going to introduce a cauliflower or some other unwanted effect. There we go. So maybe it's some sort of impending storm. Some points of interest here. I think when this dries it will look interesting because we've got white snow here, so I think this is going to create some interesting contrasts. To work my sienna into the mix. So this here I am painting a little bit of those, introducing some of those trees in the background. They're ever so faint, but they're there. Again, being careful to preserve this whiteness of the snow, and still being quite loose and free in my sketch. Here we go. So as that dries, let's just give a little bit of... So as it dries, let's paint the pond. So the pond is, it's got that sort of neutral tone to it, fairly cool. So cerulean blue, more cerulean blue than burnt sienna. That should give me the kind of the coolness that I want from the pond. Now I'm using rough paper, so you can see it leaves these marks and these white skips, and I'm going to preserve some of them because I think it introduces an interesting kind of pattern into the middle ground. I'm looking for some of the areas of points of interest on this. So I can see that this is slightly darker, so I'm adding a little bit more pigment into this area. Maybe a little bit here as well. Being careful to preserve my little glowing reflections. Now I can see that in the middle ground there's this area of green. Now I don't particularly like it. I don't think it works with the picture that I'm trying to make. So I think I'm going to turn it into a kind of a zone of wintry foliage, which is kind of browny. And that's just a little bit of creative license, I guess, that I'm using or allowing myself today. Let's see, so I can test if it's dry enough. Nope. Yeah, let's add a little bit of texture into the background. It's a fairly dry brush, just giving that sense of distance by adding some texture into the mix. I might darken some of these areas in the reflection whilst it's still wet. Being careful not to add extra water, just adding extra pigment in there. If I add extra water, then always there's a risk of creating a background. Yeah. Just a little bit of interest. Good, so I think now we will let it dry. Okay, so the painting first layer appears to be dry. So what I thought I'd do now is go into the tree and just lay down the first branches and the trunks and the trunk of the tree. The reason I let it dry is because I wanted to have some nice hard edges on these branches here, which are in the foreground, and yeah, so for that reason I wanted to make sure that the background is fully dry. So to do the tree, I'm gonna do the tree trunk first, because that's the largest area that I need to cover with my paints, and I'm mixing up again a mixture of burnt sienna and cerulean blue, more on the burnt sienna side, just to maintain the kind of the brownness of the tree. Now the tree isn't just purely one side brown, the other side white. There are these sort of skip areas, which are areas of snow cover. So I'm trying to use my brush in a relatively random way as I draw around them, around the snowy patches. I'm just going to drop in some cerulean blue into there. So this is pure pigment. I'm dropping it straight into the areas that I think should have a little bit of added value. And I'm just going to add some more burnt sienna in there as well. Again, this just creates interest so that my painting isn't as flat as just a single color. These extra I can suck up with my brush, extra drops of water. There we are. Okay, and now I'm just going to transition, or I'll try and transition to my square brush, and I'm going to put down some of those main branches. So with the edge of the square brush, I'm just going to paint along here. I'm not too worried about skipping. I am a bit worried about having this be a bit too wide. Let's go like that. But I'm not too worried about skipping some of these areas, because again, there's discontinuity in how my eye views this tree. I find tree branches often difficult to draw because they require a steady hand. Now I'm switching back to my round, and I'm mixing up a slightly darker pigment so I can again introduce some variation into the shape of the branch. Obviously, trees are a lot easier to draw, I think, than the human finger, because we don't need to think too much about whether we've got the right tree branches, whether they're pointing in the right direction, because as long as we get something resembling a tree, it looks good to our eye. Right, so now I'm just going to glaze over the foreground a little bit with a cool cerulean blue mixture, making sure that this is completely dry, so I can start glazing the foreground a little bit, painting around the tree. As you can see, as I layer watercolors, I get a slightly darker value, which is what I like. This is what I want. So a few points of interest on the foreground. Generally speaking, as things come closer to us, they appear to be darker. So that's why I'm adding some darker values in the foreground here. I'm going to shift my eye towards the pond. More specifically, I'm going to start working on the banks of this pond. Now the banks are usually darker than the rest of it, so this is what I'm going to implement here as well. So adding a little bit of darker forms along the banks of this pond. Okay. I'm going to switch to my rigger, and I'm just going to add a little bit of detail into this area. Now the main thing that I'm thinking about here is the fact that I have areas of, this is the lightest area of the page, and the general rule is that we want something dark against the light, so that it creates an area of visual interest. So this is what I'm doing here. I'm just adding some darker values to offset my lightest tones. Okay, and then I'm just going to darken up a little bit around the edges here as well. Just thinking about the water itself, whether I should add some ripple effect into the water, or if it's that's just going to look like it's been overworked. We can add a few here. Let's see what happens. I'm not particularly keen on it. But maybe it's okay. Now the other thing is that the side of this tree is not fully white. There is a very light or very cool value just on the left hand side of the tree, and that's the shadow of the snow itself. So this is what I'm going to add here as well. So I'm just basically playing with my cerulean and neutral mixtures until I get the right sort of tone that I'm looking for. Let's get rid of this extra water. Good, and then we will let it dry again. Okay, so this is relatively dry. So what I've done now is I've switched to my rigger brush and I mixed up a dark combination of my cerulean blue and burnt sienna. So this will give me the kind of the dark strokes that I'm looking for. So I need to be careful. I need to use them fairly sparingly so that I'm not overcomplicating the picture. And then I'm adding some texture into the tree trunk to convey the feeling of sort of old wood. Going to add a little bit of burnt sienna into the trunk. And now the trickiest part, to me at least, is just adding these distant branches. So first I'm going to start with very light value because I don't know what that is, what it will look like. But I just want to create this sense of busyness, sort of something that's not obviously when I look at this painting or when I look at the photograph, I can see these tree branches, but I can't. I'm not really focusing on any one of them. They're all just coalesce into this single unit for me, at least. And this is what I'm going to try and do here: is just use my rigger to randomly place some of these smaller branches, so that we've got a similar, so that we're relatively faithful to the reference. I don't want to overdo it, so I think I might just leave it at that. some texture in the foreground so that it's a little bit more interesting. So again, this isn't 100% faithful representation of this reference photograph, and that really wasn't the aim. The aim was to practice some negative painting, so preserving the white of the page so that we create an illusion of snow. So I think we're nearly there. It's just needing to place these carefully chosen dark marks to create the most effect. Okay. Now what I like to do is I like to remove the tape around the painting, and that allows me to see it as it's intended, and this means that I can judge whether there are other elements that I need to add as a final thing. So what I think I do need to is just darken this snowy area at the base of the tree. So here, I think this needs to be darker. And then we glaze this a little as well. Something like that. Darken it up as we at the base too. Oh, I thought this was wet. It's okay. Okay, so I think that'll do for now. I hope you enjoyed this little demonstration, and again, the subject of this little painting was a tree, a snowy tree, and again, I hope you've learned a little bit. I really enjoy doing this, and I will see you next time. Take care.